Who are some famous INFJs, and what do they have in common? Check out today's show to find out. On today's show, we're going to take a look at some INFJ activists, authors, scholars, and an entrepreneur. You can find INFJs in other fields, but this show will focus on these particular INFJs. The first activist is probably the most popular INFJ, and I'm sure you recognize him immediately. It's Mahatma Gandhi, and he's famous for leading the Indian independence movement, but it's not that he led it that made him so famous, but how he did it. He did it through non-violent means, through fasting and through displays that weren't harming anybody. And as a result, he inspired several other activists that we'll take a look at in just a moment. But Gandhi is definitely thought to be an INFJ, although I'm sure he never took the Myers-Briggs test. It's just based on characteristics. We're making this assumption. The second famous INFJ and activist, another famous person, is Martin Luther King Jr. And Martin Luther King Jr., of course, led the civil rights movement. And Dr. King led a movement that largely resembled Gandhi's in that it was nonviolent and it promoted the good of a lot of people. And those are the factors that really set apart the INFJs. They want to do something that benefits everyone and promotes equality and justice, but they do it through nonviolent means and through means that promote togetherness, harmony, and healing for the community at large. You can also tell through their rhetoric and prose that it's somewhat poetic and visionary, and they are that as leaders. It's also interesting to observe that the INFJs we're going to look at today are to some extent scholarly and learned, or at least they enjoy learning on their own and continue to grow as people and to promote the growth of others. The third famous INFJ and famous activist is Nelson Mandela, and he led the anti-apartheid movement in South Africa, and he was also the first black head of state. So Mandela was also someone who led a nonviolent protest for the good of all the people in his country and who made a big impact on those around him without promoting unnecessary bloodshed and violence. Now let's turn to two famous authors, and one is the author of nonfiction books, whereas the other is the author of many fiction books that are widely read. And the first author is Stephen R. Covey. Now I haven't really come across any material that has said Stephen Covey was an INFJ, but in having read his book, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, the way it was laid out struck me as a very INFJ way to approach the world. First and foremost, it was very cognitive and big picture visionary. It also was promoting personal growth and in a very big way. So it looked at how people grow and change, and then it promoted a very planned, begin with the end in mind means of getting there. And in fact, that is one of the 7 habits that Covey talks about, that you need to stop and think about the trajectory of your life and then pull back and make decisions accordingly. And he also talks about really investing in other people and balancing life so that you're not just successful at work, but that you're successful with family and that you use your gifts to the best of your ability. So if you get the chance and you haven't yet read this book, or maybe you have read it and like to read it again, look at it through the lens of an INFJ and see if you don't disagree that Stephen Covey is an INFJ. The second famous INFJ author, the fiction author, is one you probably know, and she is J.K. Rowling, the author of the Harry Potter series. And from what I've heard, she's actually a self-proclaimed INFJ, or one that's taken the test and confirmed that she's an INFJ. So her novels are ones that have highly developed characters and look at personality and have, again, the story of personal growth in them as well. And you can see the trace of INFJ characteristics in Mrs. Rowling. Let's turn to the scholars, and we'll start with Noam Chomsky. And Chomsky is a famous linguist, cognitive scientist, and he's famous in a number of other fields. And I think that's what's most impressive about Chomsky is how wide his understanding and knowledge is. And that fits with the INFJ approach to life. We like to understand all the disciplines and how they fit together. We want the big picture. We want to just understand how the world works. That's how introverted intuition is. Chomsky is considered by many the father of modern linguistics, and he's written over 100 books, which is a ton of books. So he's a pretty amazing guy. I first learned about him when I was studying for my ESL certificate, helping other people learn English as a second language. And I was learning about how people learn language because Chomsky has a lot to say about syntax and semantics and the different parts of language. So many consider him to be an INFJ. Carl Jung is another INFJ scholar that you should know. And if you're familiar with Myers-Briggs, you probably heard his name before because his theory gave rise to what Elizabeth Myers and Isabel Briggs turned into the Myers-Briggs personality theory. So Carl Jung is a famous psychiatrist, psychoanalyst, and the father of analytical psychology. Those are interests that draw many INFJs to them, so it's not a surprise that he'd be considered an INFJ. And his mind naturally went to thinking about how people approach the world and what motivates them, which you might also recognize as a common INFJ trait. I know that's how my mind works. So Carl Jung is considered to be an INFJ as well. The third and final scholar that you should know about is Jane Goodall. And Goodall is famous as an anthropologist and primatologist and now a conservationist. But the work that most people know about is what she did with chimpanzees in Africa, showing that they can use tools, that they're social creatures, and that they're highly intelligent. Last famous INFJ I have to share with you today is an entrepreneur, and his name is Michael Hyatt. And Hyatt is an author, a speaker, and the former CEO of Thomas Nelson Publishing. And Michael has written 3 books that are popular. One is called Platform, Get Noticed in a Noisy World. The next is Living Forward. And the third book, his most recent book, is Best Year Ever. And the first title helps people build an online platform with a following of subscribers and make an impact in their niche. The second one helps people design a plan for their lives so that they're living each day based on their priorities and they end their life with the epitaph that they really want. And the final book helps people work that out even better by creating a plan, a step-by-step plan. It's based on his really popular course, Best Year Ever. That's 5 days of planning that can set the trajectory of your year and make it way more effective. Hyatt also has productivity courses and tools to help leaders and a lot of great leadership advice. So just based on his desire to help people understand themselves and grow as people and be as effective as possible while maintaining balance between family, life, and other aspects of their worlds, it's pretty clear that Hyatt is an INFJ. If you want to better understand these famous INFJs and your INFJ personality, then I encourage you to grab a free copy of my book, The INFJ Personality Guide, which is going to help you understand yourself and the mindsets that motivate you and cause you to do what you do. It's also going to introduce you to some common INFJ challenges and some ways to overcome those challenges. And you can get this book one of 2 ways. First, you can text the letters INFJ to the number 444999, or you can visit ispeakpeople.com/INFJ-personality-guide. And I'll put a link to that page in the description below this video. Thank you so much for watching this video today. I hope that it served you. If you haven't yet subscribed to the channel, I encourage you to do that. I'm creating new content each and every week for INFJs just like you. I'm looking forward to seeing you on the next show.